Russian President Vladimir Putin and Chinese President Xi Jinping made a renewed call for peace talks to end the war in Ukraine. Now, one can debate just how sincere these appeals are, particularly from Putin, but it is true that in February, China put forward a peace proposal to end the war. It's been criticized for not including an explicit call for Russia to withdraw its military forces. But if you read the document, the very first principle is to respect the sovereignty of all countries, which in this context would mean that any peace settlement would include the withdrawal of Russian forces from Ukraine, even if it doesn't explicitly say so. The second principle of the peace plan is to end Cold War-era military blocs. Quote, all parties should oppose the pursuit of one's own security at the cost of others' security, prevent bloc confrontation, and work together for peace and stability on the Eurasian continent. Again, the document doesn't explicitly call for an end to NATO expansion, but that's what's implied. And in just those two principles, there is a framework for an agreement, one based on a withdrawal of Russian troops in exchange for limits on NATO expansion. Of course, there are still outstanding issues of how the people in eastern Ukraine and Crimea will be governed, but that is something that should be a part of negotiations instead of a protracted war that by some estimates has already killed 250,000 people. But the U.S. State Department panned the appeals for peace. It said there can be no serious peace talks until Russia first pulls all of its troops out of Ukraine, which is typically not how negotiated settlements work. Here's how the Secretary of State himself, Antony Blinken, put it this week in response to the Chinese peace plan.
Calling for a ceasefire that does not include the removal of Russian forces from Ukrainian territory would effectively be supporting the ratification of Russian conquest. It would recognize Russia's attempts to seize a sovereign neighbor's territory by force. It would enable Russia to further entrench positions in Ukraine. And a ceasefire now, without a durable solution, would allow President Putin to rest and refit his troops and then restart the war at a time more advantageous to Russia. The world should not be fooled by any tactical move by Russia, supported by China or any other country, to freeze the war on its own terms.
So basically, the State Department's position is, we will not support talks to end the war until Russia ends the war. Pentagon then announced it was speeding up tank shipments to Kyiv. And as the U.S. sends arms to Ukraine by the trainload, it's also sending cannon fodder back to Russia. The Guardian reported that the Biden administration quietly resumed deportation flights to Russia. Several Russian asylum seekers had arrived in the U.S. trying to avoid conscription, and the Biden administration said a year ago that it wouldn't send them back to Russia. Last weekend, an immigration attorney was shocked to see a young Russian man who was a client of hers put on a plane back to Russia. Jennifer Scarborough told The Guardian that immigration officials had determined that fear of conscription did not meet the criteria for a credible fear, and she's now worried that her other Russian clients could be sent back soon, too.